who will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes to drill down on the plan that we had a glimpse of this morning from various colleagues. So KW Ng, who's the Chief Town Planner of the Planning Department, will give us a talk about decarbonization and climate adaptation from a planning perspective. Please.
Thank you, Christine. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm KW Ng, spoken. I'm from the Planning Department of the Hong Kong SAR government. It is my great pleasure to join this workshop this afternoon with 10 other distinguished speakers. Being a town planner and the only government representative in this afternoon, let me try to set out the scene for further in-depth discussion. These photographs show some undesirable scenes in Hong Kong. Will this happen again? All the experts, I think, will say yes. And most of them will supplement that this situation will be getting more and more common in our daily lives. Everyone has a role to play in the battle against climate change. But what could town planners do? Being a global city, Hong Kong has already started preparing to embrace various urban challenges in the 21st century. Focusing on climate change, the then Environment Bureau published the Hong Kong's Climate Action Plan 2050. In 2021, setting our targets of reducing total carbon emission by 50% by 2035 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. From the perspective of strategic spatial planning, the government published the territorial development strategy called Hong Kong 2030+, and a development strategy for the Northern Metropolis in 2021. These two sets of documents, focusing on environment and strategic planning, seems to have no direct relationship, but in fact, they are highly related. In Hong Kong 2030+, our vision is to become a livable, competitive, and sustainable Asia-world city, championing sustainable development for meeting our present and future social, environmental, and economic needs of the present and future is our overarching planning goal. The strategy mainly includes two parts. Firstly, the three building blocks. They are first, enhancing livability in a compact high-density city. Second, embrace new economic opportunities and challenges. And last, creating capacity for sustainable growth. The second part of the strategy is a conceptual spatial framework comprising two metropolises and two development axes, which I will explain in the next slide. Overall, these two parts are supported by a smart, green, resilient city strategy. The conceptual spatial framework is government's overall view on Hong Kong's long-term spatial development. The harbour metropolis in the south here covers the existing metro area on the Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, Tsuen Wan, and Kwai Tsing, and the future artificial island, Kao Isha Artificial Island here in the central waters. The Northern Metropolis in the north, which is here, covers the existing and planned development in Yuen Long and North districts, and a number of new development clusters near or along the border with Shenzhen. For the two development axes, the western one is called Western Economic Corridor, covers the Northwest New Territory in the north, North Lantau in the middle, and the Kao Isha Artificial Island in the south. The Eastern Knowledge and Technology Corridor comprises different existing and planned I&T-related development, including universities, science park, and the industrial estates. As you can see, The conceptual spatial framework defines the growth area, the possible solution spaces, and conceptual transport corridor, which is in this light blue color. Under a capacity creating approach, which we emphasize, to prepare for the changes and increasing our city resilience in the years to come. Despite the development of successful new town in Hong Kong, there are inadequacies in attaining home job spatial balance and self-sufficiency in the new territories. Focusing on the two metropolis with good railway network helps to optimize the territorial spatial pattern and improve our home job spatial balance, thus significantly lowering both energy consumption and carbon emissions arising from work journeys. The Northern Metropolis Development Strategy is a conceptual strategic plan proposed for the first time to adopt a proactive conservation policy to suitably utilize, revitalize, and conserve natural resources. The overall target is to increase and create the Northern Metropolis with unique metropolitan landscape featured with urban-rural integration and coexistence of development and conservation. Under that strategy, the environmental capacity is expected to not only maintained, but also enhanced through the proactive conservation policy. About 700 hectares of private wetland and conservation area, including fish ponds, are proposed to be resumed by the government. They will be designated as multifunctional wetland conservation parks for scientific management and advanced operation, so as to increase the overall ecological value and raise aquaculture productivity. Under the strategic direction laid down in the Hong Kong 2030+, all the new development area and strategic growth area could provide opportunities for comprehensive planning, spatial planning especially, with smart, green, and resilient concepts. What this means is that it allows the adoption of the best practice and the most advanced technology in the aspect of sustainable planning and urban design, integrated smart green resilient infrastructure system, and smart mobility, which help build low-carbon livable communities to help contribute Hong Kong's target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. Let me further elaborate. First, sustainable planning and urban design. For sustainable planning and urban design, one of the key principles is to provide convenient and resilient land use planning. The underlying goal of this 15-minute neighborhood concept is to plan for accessible and no-carbon communities, as it shall help reduce carbon footprint otherwise induced by other mechanical transportation or lifestyle. In the planning of Gaoyichao Artificial Islands, a number of residential neighborhoods will be proposed to be connected by green mass transit. Each neighborhood, with an area of about 80 to 100 hectares, will be planned with transit station, commercial facilities, open space, and commercial facilities, all well connected with pedestrian and cycling network. The distribution of different land users within the neighborhood will be optimized, with a view to enabling residents to access their daily destination within 15 minutes walking or cycling. Hong Kong is well endowed with green spaces and water resources. Apart from enriching biodiversity, these green and blue assets will become key components for achieving livability and sustainability. Both sponge city and blue-green infrastructure concepts will be widely adopted in our projects for flood prevention function, as they are very useful in coping with overtopping rates and rising sea level conditions. Reinventing the blue-green assets and system in the built environment are also modern stormwater management approach that helps to fully utilize the land resources while at the same time solve drainage problem. Take Kauija artificial island as an example when design. Oh, sorry, this may be. I have higher slide. I need to. Yes. Take Kauija artificial island project as an example. When designing the coastline, a progressive adaptive approach is used on coastal resilience to balance both coastal defense and urban design. To reduce the impact of severe weather to the public, a 20 to 30 meter waterfront promenade will be designated to act as the buffer zone. In normal days, this promenade could be attractive leisure and recreation destinations for the public. Another key component of sustainable planning and urban design is to have climate-responsive urban and building measures. By taking into account the prevailing wind direction and building orientations, the natural ventilation and lighting will be enhanced, thereby reducing the electricity demand and air conditioning, the electricity demand for air conditioning and lighting in the future buildings. By the same token, green building design and certification will also help enhance and optimize energy consumption and management. Modular integrated construction (MIC) method will also be used as far as possible to reduce carbon emission and energy demand at construction stage. We also aim to produce urban forestry so as to protect and enhance nature carbon sink and promote biodiversity in the urban environment. The planning of Kauija Artificial Island is rigorously exploring the feasibility of adopting eco-shoreline with a will to regenerating marine habitat in the course of urban development after reclamation. Climate change is one of the most pressing challenges. The city's ability to make a transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy will be increasingly important going forward. In our major development project, we'll strive to increase the share of green and renewable energy that does not produce greenhouse gas, such as hydrogen. Developing a circular economy is equally important. Here I feel example of smart green resilient infrastructure that promotes the concept and will be appropriately adopted in some of our projects, including Kauija Artificial Islands. District cooling systems, which are known to enhance energy efficiency and reduce carbon emissions when compared with traditional air conditioning. Advanced foodways, sewage, sludge, and aerobic co-digestion facility could not only achieving synergy in co-location, but also yield biogas for electricity generations. Converting recyclable into useful resources, such as recycling and waste management facilities, can reduce the pressure on landfill and carbon emissions from waste management. We will also widely explore the adoption of common utility tunnels in our future projects. By keeping maintenance and renovation works underground, it could avoid traffic, which can result in extended travel time and increased energy consumption. Common utility tunnel also enhance safety of underground utility works and help reduce air and noise pollution caused by roadworks and machinery, as well as being protected from extreme weather conditions. Last, smart mobility. Presented in this slide are some of the key components for supporting future mobility. Railways are environmental friendly mass carrier and should continue to serve as the backbone of our public transport system. Various types of facilities would be provided at the new generation transport interchange hubs, which can support the development of on-demand mobility services and ensure seamless interchange between different green mass transit, so as to reduce carbon emission while enhancing convenience. By leveraging technology, smart mobility can enable more effective traffic management, alleviate road traffic congestion, and optimize the use of limited road space. In large-scale projects like Kaohsiung Artificial Island, comprehensive pedestrian and cycling networks, as I mentioned, will be provided to connect residential neighborhood, the central business area, and major attractions. Also, the concept of superblocks design with car lights or car-free zones will be considered, which means, except for registered vehicles, other vehicles will be restricted or partially restricted to that area. To plan and install charging networks for new energy vehicles at early stage is also important. In both Kaohsiung Artificial Island and Northern Metropolis, supporting facilities for electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles could be provided, such as charging station and hydrogen fueling station to promote the popularization of new energy vehicles. As conclude, global trends such as climate change, resources scarcity, etc., present both risks and opportunities to us. The impacts of this factor must be clearly understood and taken into account when town planners prepare future town plans for our city. I pledge all of you to work hand in hand to pursue the no-carbon transformation in Hong Kong for the well-being of the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please take your seat. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask our speakers to come in groups. They form kind of natural groups. So Professor Charles Ng, Debra TAN, and Dr. Michael Lau, perhaps you can all take a seat in front. But Charles, I think you are going to come here to present first. Please. So you will hear three people who will talk about physical risk and biodiversity together. And then we will go on to the next pack and then the final pack. This hopefully will help us to organize our thoughts more easily.
I guess I can take off my mask.
You're not supposed to today.
Oh,
yes, yes. So maybe introduce yourself. And then, Thank you, Charles.
So I introduce myself.
Please introduce yourself, yes.
That's okay. And good afternoon, and ladies and gentlemen. And a couple of days ago, and Christine sent me an email and asked me to talk about this, future of slope management to protect people and assets. And I was very excited for the first 30 seconds, so I immediately replied yes. And once after I replied yes, I start to worry, because it's a future. I'm not God. How will I know future? And then you're talking about slope management. Without knowing future, how are we going to plan? Okay, or plan what we are going to do. What are we going to do? So actually, your topic worries me for the last 2 days. And I just finished my PowerPoint literally 5 minutes ago before I came up here. And especially listen to a lot of government officials' presentation this morning. But anyway, I promise you to just try. And I'm going to introduce you I would say probably a university-led industrial government collaborative project, biggest one I think is so far in Hong Kong. And the title actually funded by the Research Grants Council under the AOE's Area of Excellence scheme is a Center for Safety. I hope this is relevant to the topic today. And of course, I will not go into too much technical detail here. And those are the collaborators, you can see from different universities, government departments, and also Red Cross, etc. So the project mission is to establish a multidisciplinary world-leading research and education center for society. The important point perhaps for the audience here today is the last line, empower community resilience. But before we talk about resilience, we have to predict something. Okay, that's the future. So at that time, the project was funded about 4 years ago. So at that time, and I told the Research Grant Council, that's what the problem at that time, 4 years ago, okay, not consider increasing extreme rainstorms in design, that means due to climate change, okay, and no specific early warning for extreme rainfall, and in the existing early warning system, and not enough fundamental understanding, okay, and also insufficient public awareness, okay. And actually this morning, Dr. William John, he also touched upon those points this morning. But I was very happy this morning to see actually government has done quite substantial amount of work since 4 years ago. So this is our research strategy, and we divided our big research team into 3 major tasks. Task A, prediction, okay. Now this is important. When you talk about future, you got to talk about prediction, okay. So we make use of machine learning and so on, and we are calling here Lessons and also Jimmy Fong are here, okay. So those parts they are the experts responsible for this part, and then we have other colleagues. Task B, okay, talk about using AI, machine learning, and to try to assess risk, okay, of landslides, and then we have Task C, and it is essentially my part to think about how to develop early warning systems and also green mitigation measures. So those are 3 tasks supposedly to address those problems, P1, P2, P4. Okay, if you could recall, those are corresponding here, but in the interest of time, I've got to skip. Now, the current biggest geotechnical problem in Hong Kong is debris flow, and this morning, so due to natural disaster, okay? It's not due to man-made slopes, it's due to natural. So just for you to see what it's about. Okay. Now this is in Brazil, 2008, not that long time ago. This is Korea.
호사와 물이 쏟아집니다. 차량들이 순식간에 사라졌습니다.
This is not movie, right? This is real.
여신은 급히 제동 장치를 밟았고 토사가 유리창에 튀었지만 차량이 휩쓸려가는 것은 간신히 피할 수 있었습니다.
Now this is in the country, the United States. This is 2006 in mainland. And recent one, 2019 in Fujian province in mainland. And I believe we have financial insurers here. How are you going to insure this? And there's something for you to think about. And that's the problem our team is trying to address. Okay. Or try to address before address how to predict. Okay. And not just the video I show you. I got the data from International Disaster Database. Okay, if you see on the left-hand side is the number of casualties last 50 years, and on the right is financial loss. Okay, we are talking about more than 10 million deaths last 50 years. Okay, and 80 billion US dollar per year. Okay, financial loss. Okay, so I guess we have many people from financial sector may be interested in this type of data. Okay, so how to do the prediction? Okay, and so we like to task C. Then we try to understand landslide initiation, failure mechanisms, and interaction between landslide debris and barrier system. That means resistance. Okay. Unfortunately, we have unprecedented modern capability now. Okay. As I said, we are not God. Okay. we don't know what happens, but we can try to simulate, okay, and then to develop preventive measures, okay. So you need environmental chamber, which is shown on the left-hand side here. So in our geothermal centrifuge, we can model different environmental effects, such as extreme rainfall, extreme temperature cycles, okay, humidity. So in our this environmental chamber, okay. Now based on our free weather calculation, then we can simulate the stability of that slope, for example, then provide data, okay. If we have an insurer, then we can they can use the data for their assessment, okay. And also we have this one is the world's longest testing facility, 172 meter long, flume, to verify, okay, any of our free weather development and also from test data from the environmental chamber. And also we are in the process of develop early warning system, okay, to match what Christine asked me to do is protect the people and assets, okay. We must provide early warning, okay, and we try to increase the lead time so that to give more people, if it happens, can escape. Nowadays, at least we need three hours, okay, to do the prediction. Now we hope we can extend to give more lead time, 6 hours, so that people can more time to evacuate. And how to do it? Okay, using AI technology these days, and if you remember task A, okay, and also using digital twins, okay, to develop an evacuation strategy, okay, to protect to provide an immersive education, including there's a 4 bullet point here, okay, to provide an immersive education environment in safety that relate to education as well, emerging AR and VR technologies, and also negative or visualization based technology. Then we empower community and improve their disaster preparedness, and then publish, okay, warning messages through local radio and television and so on, and then quantitative index, okay, to improve the public perception. And this is what we've been doing, and hopefully we can report to you more results later. And about the protective system, okay, and I do believe in future we are going to see this on the top left corner here, more and more of the so-called flexible barriers, multiple ones, okay. The current, in the world, there's no standard design guideline for multiple barriers, which it sounds simple, but it's quite difficult. For example, how many you want to put it, what's the spacing and so on, okay. But this type of mitigation system is far better than to put a big concrete block underneath at the bottom of a hillside, because we can stop the debris at different levels, and also they nicely blend with the natural environment. So it's an environmentally solution and also low carbon type of technique. Okay, this I would say predict future in a sense. We use more and more this type of multi-flexible barrier system, and we already developed design guideline, but we need more data to verify our design guideline. Whether it's really appropriate for under the changing climate. So I think that's all I would like to share with you quickly. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charles. Actually, thank you, Charles, and I do have a couple of comments, and I have to apologize to Michael and Debra because I forgot there was no screen there, so you weren't able to watch the movie. But you can, is it? Okay, good. Now, I just want to have a quick comment. Charles, you know, for those of you who don't know Charles, he is pretty much one of the top guys in the world on slope management. And we're very fortunate in Hong Kong to have Charles and his team at HKUST. So perhaps for those of you who are thinking about physical risk, for those of you who are thinking about financial risk, how we can have better communication and collaboration on how to use the knowledge for safety, and also I think technology. There's a lot of technology in all of this. How the technology that relates to climate change, to AI, to data handling, to ideas about how to communicate to massive number of people. Should there be, right, some kind of risk due to severe weather that is going to happen in the next 3 to 6 hours. All of those things needs to be rethought. Many opportunities, and so glad that, Charles, that you are with us in Hong Kong and doing all this tremendous research work. So now I'd like to introduce Debra from China Water Risk, who's going to share another perspective with us. And Michael, since there are slides, if you want to maybe sit somewhere where I'm so sorry, just now, I forgot there was something that I wasn't sure you can watch it. Debra, please.
Thanks, Christine. Right, I've got my 5 minutes to talk about sea level rise and its impact on Hong Kong and planning. I know all of you have been staring at that for a while, wondering where that is. Anybody? Any guesses? Causeway Bay. Right, I think we heard a lot this morning about sea level rise from all the various professors and doctors and etc. But I think for those of you who were not here this morning, from the WMO and also Professor Dai, Professor Tallis, the key points, maybe top 3 takeaways on sea level rise is 1, it's rising faster than we think, probably on a global perspective 2 times above global average of what we projected it to be. And a lot of this is because, so why do we get it so wrong? It's because we actually, climate science on this front is evolving very quickly. There's not a lot of data on this because we've just observed some recent ice movements and so on. And there's lots of projects going on globally about how do we model this. And he's talking about supercomputer projects and et cetera, and this is happening at a global level so we can get a better grip on these numbers. And the third part, I think, the key takeaway, Professor Tallis also sort of said this morning, that we've lost the game on ice and also ocean warming, which then accelerates sea level rise. And with sea level rise, it's important to understand that even if we get to net zero today, sea levels will continue rising. How fast depends on how fast we can rein in emissions. So my 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about sea level rise from a financial perspective and why it's down to risk as well as science in thinking about future-proofing Hong Kong. Sea level rise has deep financial implications. Recently, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority did a stress test on 27 banks and found that about $1 trillion worth of mortgage loans are actually exposed to climate risks, primarily floods and typhoons. So this will be coastal flooding, storm surges, and so on. This represents about 30% of the 27 participating banks' loan books, and clearly that's systemic risk to the financial industry. If you sort of look broader than the real estate sector, which we all know is very important to Hong Kong, and look at trade, the airport, ports, and key links are also low-lying, and we're looking really at about $8.2 trillion Hong Kong dollars worth of trade in import and export worth of goods. So ultimately, we are thinking that about 82% of Hong Kong government's revenues are actually vulnerable to SLR. So given this kind of exposure to sea level rise, sorry, SLR is sea level rise, not some fancy camera. Escalating SLR is an existential threat, basically, to the SAR's revenues, banks, as well as trade, right? And it's important to understand here that this Hong Kong MA test was actually only done at 0.5 meters of SLR by 2050, right? And we've all heard that sea level rise is escalating as fast as possible. So this 2050 number by the MA is actually at the worst case scenario, which is where we're heading. So recently the IPCC AR6 has, in its summary for policymakers, warned that approaching 2 to 5 meters of sea level rise cannot be ruled out by 2100 and 2150. And this is clearly a lot bigger than 0.5 meters, or the 1 meter in the previous worst case scenario. Now to deal with this, WG1 is working group 1, so this is the first IPCC assessment report. To deal with this in the second report, the IPCC recommends transformative adaptation as opposed to incremental adaptation. So this is adaptation looking at a much longer time frame because you're going to be faced with these types of potential sea level rise going forward. Now, And you can sort of like plan for that in the future, but put that, I guess, in various phases. And if sea level rise does accelerate, then you have a plan for this, rather than sort of approach it on an incremental basis. So that's a recommendation under Working Group 2. Now, to be clear, this 2 to 5 meters, the deep uncertainties exist around this because the ice science is new. It's low confidence not because there's no probability of it happening, because that cannot be ruled out. It's possible. It's low confidence because we just don't have the years and years of observations that we have to sort of like make it a high confidence or medium confidence. But it's important enough for the policymakers to put it in the SPM, the Summary for Policymakers. So this needs country sign-off to get into this report. And it's in there because the impacts are huge, right? So we cannot afford to get this wrong. So which levels do we adapt at? This is about 1 meter of sea level rise without any storms or whatever. So you can sort of see Hong Kong can survive this quite easily, right? And you can do incremental adaptation for this. But at 2 to 3 meters of sea level rise, this is what this Hong Kong is going to look like every day. So clearly for this, we're going to do transformative adaptation, right? Then the question is, what's the likelihood of this multi-meter sea level rise, right, by 2100? We actually think that this is the wrong question to focus on. The real question is, can Hong Kong survive if we end up with this levels of sea level rise, because it cannot be ruled out. And even if it's a 1% chance that this could happen, surely we should be planning comprehensive system-wide transformation adaptation now so we could ratchet up to this if it does happen, right? So basically, when it comes to planning sea level rise, it comes down to risk appetite. Can we afford to let the previous picture happen? And if it's not, then risk will dictate adaptation levels. And here we wrote a piece called Future-Proofing APAC Banks, and all the Hong Kong banks are in here, as well as others. So there are 17 APAC banks included in this report, and we looked at their loan books and their concentrated exposure to risks. And banks are also really important because they can provide money for financing. And money also decides adaptation. If you don't have enough adaptation money, then you're going to build not the A+ adaptation you want, you can build a C+ or whatever. So that also could lead to maladaptation. And given that sea levels will rise, even if we were at net zero today, we need to start stress testing at the worst levels. So at the 2 to 3 meters of SLR by 2100 and 5 meters by 2150. Because today, at 1.2 degrees, we've already locked in 8 meters of sea level rise. So locked in 8 meters of sea level rise, whether that will happen faster or slower will just depend on our decarbonization path, which globally does not look good, even if Hong Kong is really pulling its weight. So, oops. I want to show you some other slide here. If you are keen, you can also look at this fact sheets that we also produced on Hong Kong, basically stress testing about over close to 200,000 assets at the very worst, at the top end of the level, to sort of like kickstart a conversation on transformative adaptation. I'll stop there, thanks.
Thank you,
with
Debra.
great risks comes great opportunity, right? There's a lot of money at risk and a lot of money to be made from this.
Thank you, Debra. May I invite Michael to talk about biodiversity?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank Hong Kong UST for organizing this very special conference, I think the first one of its kind, and for inviting me to come and share the view on slightly different aspects of climate adaptation and resilience. It seems quite strange to talk about biodiversity and nature-based solutions when we focus on a city like Hong Kong. That's why I went up to this place a few days ago when the sky was clear to take this picture. The towering city at the back is Shenzhen, and this is Ho Hok Wai, with a lot of fish ponds and marsh and green hills at the back. And these white buildings are the Community Isolation Center at Lok Ma Chau Loop. That will be our future Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation Technology Park for the Northern Metropolis. So all these places will become the Northern Metropolis. And when we talk about climate adaptations and resilience, obviously the built infrastructures are mega important, and we hear a lot, and we heard a lot this morning from the various government departments about the efforts and the plans to make these infrastructure resilience. But I think we also cannot ignore the surrounding environment and even treat these surrounding environment as natural infrastructure. So let's look at some of the data. So show you Ho Hok Wai, but how about the entire territory? The entire territory, we actually is quite blessed with plenty of green and blue spaces. The building area is only about 25.4%. It's going to grow. But woodland, we have 26%. Shrubland, 22.8%. Grassland, 16.1% of the entire territory. And for wetlands, it's quite limited. The fish ponds and gateways, only 1.4% because Hong Kong is very hilly. But these are concentrated in the Northwest New Territories, where the Northern Metropolis is going to be built. So it occupies a very dominant features and also have got an ecological role to play in the Northern Metropolis. So look at the area. Woodland is about 290 square kilometers, shrubland slightly less, grassland less, and fish pond and gateway 16 square kilometers. So not small in terms of a small city like Hong Kong. But are these green and blue space delivering the many ecosystem services fully? Let's look at the terrestrial environment. Hong Kong used to be covered by lush evergreen forests like this, with towering trees and vines, lots of birds, mammals, insects, and the trees capture a lot of carbon, store them in the wood, and also underground the roots and the soil. They support high biodiversity, and they provide valuable materials like timber, food, medicine. They also produce oxygen when they undergo photosynthesis. They protect the soil from the blast of the raindrops, and the soil actually store the water. So a multiple ecosystem values. But we also have long history of human activities. So around 300-400 years ago, the scientists thought the original forests were more or less all gone from Hong Kong. There were some afforestation attempts when Hong Kong became a British colony, but then during the Second World War, again, a major deforestation. So when the photographer, Heather Morrison, came and visited Hong Kong slightly after, just after the Second World War, went to the New Territories. That's the landscape he saw. No trees, even vegetation was very sparse. All the topsoil got washed away. But through dedicated afforestation program by the Hong Kong government, and also through natural regeneration, we have some forests returned, like those we saw in the Hong Kong Island, in the central New Territories. But we also have hill fires, because once the forest is gone, you've got this grassy vegetation. In the dry winter, it's very conducive to have fire. So a lot of the land we nowadays are these what we call fire-maintained grassland, shrubland. Very little trees, so not playing much role in carbon sequestration, not supporting much biodiversity, not a great place to see. So very, very limited ecological value and functions. And look at it the other way. It's opportunity for forest restoration. And let's move on to the wetlands. In the northwest new territories, because it's in the Pearl River estuary, brings in a lot of sediments. We've got the shallow bay called Deep Bay. So along the coast, there's extensive mangrove forest. And along the river banks, we got swamps, we got the floodplain wetlands. But when humans settled in the area, they make use of these very productive wetland systems and modify them into first paddy fields and later into gateways for farming shrimps, and then later to fish ponds. Although these are under human management for food production, but still they're very, very productive. And let's say when the fish ponds are being drained down, you can see a lot of white birds, the egrets, and even some black-faced spoonbills, an endangered species, feeding on the small fish and shrimps in the fish ponds. So they're not only providing food for the people, supporting the livelihood of the fishermen, they're also supporting the migratory water birds. However, due to the change in the socio-economic conditions, we got a lot more freshwater fish importing from mainland China since the 1990s. So the freshwater fish, the price remained very low, and it would be difficult for the fish pond operators to get a good income. So some of these fish ponds have been abandoned or become inactive. And also the land, because it's private land, got bought up. So we got nowadays a rough estimation about 200 to 300 of hectares of fish ponds that are inactive or abandoned. And then we have these water hyacinth, very bad invasive alien species colonizing these abandoned ponds, shield out the sunlight from the water. So very, very little aquatic animals living in these abandoned ponds. And some of these ponds actually, what we called, would become terrestrialized, becoming land, and got invaded by other weeds. So again, it provides opportunity for mangrove and floodplain wetland restoration. So that's why I think nature-based solutions is very, very important to think about. It's for us to invest in nature for multiple benefits. So for nature-based solutions, it would take protection. We have to be very specific on which societal challenges we want to target. And then we have to have appropriate infrastructures, the right kind of management, and also think about restorations. And through these ecosystem-based approaches, they can help us to tackle, let's say, these 7 societal challenges, like climate change mitigations, disaster risk reduction, like flooding and erosion, and then economic and social development, also human health, food security, water security, and also biodiversity. And then we'll bring improve human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So we are actually in the United Nations decade on ecosystem restoration. So I think now it's time to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Please. So you've heard the first group, which is about physical risks, some serious risks that we have, but we've put in biodiversity so that we understand that biodiversity has multiple purposes, including helping us to make the city more resilient. So I'm going to invite the second pack. The second pack has 4 people. The first one is Gillian Meller from the MTR. She'll be followed by Don Chang, who is with Towngas, who will talk about new energy, and then followed by Albert Wong, who is the CEO of the Science Park. And then we'll have Eli KONVITZ, who's going to bring it all together, representing ULI on the nexus between adaptation and mitigation. So Gill, may I ask you for your 5 minutes?
Fantastic to be here. As well as being MTR's Legal and Governance Director, if I can, are we there? I'm also responsible for our, going the right way, ESG strategy. Sorry. Can we start those again? I need to. There we are. There we are. Not our technology, thankfully. So public transport is obviously an essential part of the solution to decarbonisation. And we do a pretty good job here in Hong Kong. Some stats there from Europe I found particularly interesting. France is proposing to ban domestic flights to destinations that can be reached by train in less than 2.5 hours. And in Sweden, they actually came up with a new term recently. I don't know, the Swedish is flitskam, but it means flying shame. And this is the idea of a movement to promote reducing the environmental impact of aviation and encouraging people, therefore, onto the railway network. As I say, here in Hong Kong, I think we do a pretty good job. Around 90% of total passenger trips are taken on public transport in Hong Kong, and about half of that 90% are on the MTR. And of course, as our friends from government pointed out earlier, railway is the backbone here of public transport in Hong Kong as part of government policy, which of course makes sense just because of the pure capacity that we can offer and the number of people that we can move on a single train compared to other modes of transport. But we also have here a very special funding model for future public transport in Hong Kong, which is known as the rail and property model. And this is a way not only of ensuring sustainable finance for new railway developments, but it also allows one of our most precious resources, land, to be used efficiently and to be used multiple times over. And it builds sustainable communities along and around the railway network. So we've really got transit-led or transit-oriented development. So you could say, well, we should stop there. This is enough. MTR, we're part of the solution, aren't we? But of course, we all need to do our bit. And so at MTR, we have a green agenda as part of our overall ESG strategy. We have 4 focus areas, looking at carbon emissions, looking at the generation of clean energy and energy efficiency, looking at waste management, and looking at green and low carbon designs for our future rail and property projects. One of our most ambitious targets on here is the setting of science-based carbon emission reduction targets for 2030. And we're currently in the process of having those validated by SBTi. Of course, the bulk of our emissions are our Scope 2 emissions, and so we are dependent on our friends at CLP and Hong Kong Electric to do their bit, but we also do need to do ours. So some of the initiatives that we have on our plate at the moment, in terms of our operating railway, we're looking at enhancing energy efficiency, so replacing our chiller system, which should give us about a 30% electricity consumption reduction. We're also using some very cool new technology known as regenerative braking technology. So this is as the trains brake on the network, we can capture the kinetic energy that they release and turn that into electrical energy, which we can then put back into our overhead wire system for future trains to use. We're generating renewable energy. So by next year, our target is to generate more than 1 million kilowatt hours. We've identified 30 sites across our network where we can put solar panels in. And we have, for those of you who haven't already got it downloaded, our Carbon Wallet app, which is a subsidiary of MTR, which is aimed to promote a low-carbon lifestyle within the city. For our new projects, again, we've got a number of initiatives ongoing. If you've been up to Hin Keng Station, you'll see there we have no air conditioning. So there is a use of natural materials and a semi-enclosed design so that you can get the ventilation that we need for it to be a comfortable environment, even without air conditioning. And Hong Shoi Q Station, which is one of our future projects, our chief architect was here, I'm not sure if he's gone yet, but has been masterminding a design which will be carbon neutral from an operating perspective. So not taking account of the traction energy required for the trains, but for the actual operation of the stations. We have a joint research lab with our friends here at UST, and one of the projects that we're working on there is an assessment tool for embodied carbon for our future railway development projects. But what is needed to move Hong Kong forward? It's fantastic, I think, here. Christine mentioned at the start that the purpose of today is to bring all these different parts of the ecosystem and all the different people that are interested in this subject together. Clearly, we need government to take the lead. We need the detailed actions and the legislation behind the Climate Action Plan 2050. And we need probably regional cooperation and action in terms of renewable energy. As businesses, we have to walk the talk. We shouldn't just rely on grid decarbonisation. We all need to be coming up with our own net zero plans. We need our friends here at the academic and research institutions and at the science park and those who have innovative and technological ideas to help us with the transition. And we all, as we mentioned, and I know we'll discuss later, really need to collaborate. So as MTR, we will continue to serve as the backbone of low-carbon public transport in Hong Kong and do our bit of the transition towards a net zero future. Thank you.
Thank you, Gill. Oh, Gill, I'm excited to hear about that we have a no air conditioning station. Wow. Wow, we should all go there, especially as the spring comes on and it gets a bit warmer, just, to see how it can work in Hong Kong. That's fantastic. Thank you. So, Don, you're all ready to go.
Yes.
So, please.
Too eager to share my news with your friends. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Don Chang from Towngas. So, we are from the energy sector. So, one of the hottest topics nowadays is about hydrogen, right? So, even the government officials, bus company, oil company, stakeholder, they always talk about hydrogen. But two very important hurdles or obstacles is where do we get the hydrogen? How do we transport the hydrogen around? So actually, in Hong Kong, we are very lucky because according to my research and also my colleagues' research, there are only 2 cities or countries in the world right now using hydrogen in their supply gas. One is Hong Kong, of course, and the other one is Singapore. Actually, every country in the world are now using natural gas. Okay, so in the other words, if you want to move to hydrogen economy, Hong Kong, Singapore, we will be the pioneer. We will be the first one. Actually, we are now using. So I suppose, I'm not too sure whether the audience here are our customer. If you are using Towngas, you are using hydrogen at the moment. So maybe you notice our logo, like at the rightmost. Actually, this year is our 160th anniversary. So we are the first utility in Hong Kong, and then we supply gas to Hong Kong citizens 160 years ago. And the recipe of our gas never changed. So 160 years ago, we are supplying the gas with the composition, like you see on the slide. Half of them is hydrogen, about 30% methane, and the other will be carbon dioxide. So actually, we have supplying this for 160 years. So it's a good case study, and also it's a proven, it's a safe, no problem. So for past maybe 1 or 2 years, there are many technical experts from all over the sea, like Germany, Japan, Korea, even China. They come to us, they ask, how can we do that? Because if they want to transform this country to hydrogen economy, one thing very important is how to transport the hydrogen all around the country. At the moment, their pipelines are good for natural gas. Okay, if you inject hydrogen in there may be some technical issue and technical problems. For the latest study, even in Germany, they are trying to blend or mix 10 or up to 20% of hydrogen into their pipeline. Okay, but if you go beyond that, there may be a problem. So that's why they come to Hong Kong, to see how we do this. And then, as I mentioned, because the 2 issues, supply and transport, are the hurdles for the other country. But for Hong Kong, we are ready. Okay, as you can see from the map, we have a very extensive pipelines, 3,700 kilometers all over Hong Kong. In the other words, we can transport, or we are already transporting the hydrogen to every corner of Hong Kong. If you have maybe an industrial plant, or hotel, or even a bus depot or oil station, if you want to use hydrogen, it's very easy. We have the pipeline over there. We just separate or extract that 50% of hydrogen out from our Towngas. Again, you can immediately use it. So that's why, we are talking to some of our stakeholders in Hong Kong if they can have hydrogen vehicles like buses or those lorries or heavy vehicles. We can actually, give them hydrogen within, a few months. Okay, so we are ready. To move forward to a hydrogen economy. And the other thing is because we have 2 production plants in Hong Kong, one at Tai Po and one at Ma Tau Kok. So it will give us a double security. Because some people worry, okay, if Hong Kong change to hydrogen economy, if our production plant goes down, what happened? But we have 2. Okay, maybe in future, if there are needs, we can build more. And the other thing is about the know-how and also the safety records. Because we are not doing some suggestion or proposal or plans. We are actually running hydrogen economy or hydrogen application in Hong Kong for so many years. And then we have our engineers, we are competent to deal with, that kind of things. So actually, according to the policy address or the government proposal, the first, stage, they plan to support the transport sector in Hong Kong, like the franchise bus and also the heavy vehicles. But actually, there are many, many stakeholders in Hong Kong. They very initiate to want to use the hydrogen. Okay, they are not even supported at this moment by the policy address, but they approach us. For example, like MTR. And also there are some boat maker making the vessels. And even, at the present moment, they are thinking about using the hydrogen, to generate electricity for some hospital and also some hotels. However, at this point, I want to make one remark, because sometimes when I present or discuss this issue to many people, they ask me, Don, your hydrogen is made from what? Okay, so we are using natural gas, okay, as our feedstock to make Towngas. In the other words, the hydrogen we are now manufacturing are from fossil fuel, okay. Then some people say, and you are using fossil fuel, it's a great hydrogen. Why you supply in Hong Kong? There's no point. Then sometimes I talk to them. Are you driving some electrical vehicle, like Tesla, or the other kind? He said, yes, I'm environmental. There's no emission. But how do you charge your battery? Okay, using grid power. Then what kind of fuel produce that electricity in Hong Kong at the moment? Of course, using coal or natural gas. Okay, some nuclear. Okay, but what's the point? The point I want to mention is because using the EV or the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle on the road, it helps to reduce the roadside emission. Okay, why is so important to reduce the roadside emission? If you look at the statistics from the health department, okay, do you know they have statistics for the past 10 years, the top 10 diseases that cause the fatality of Hong Kong citizens? Do you know which top 10? Okay, you can go to their website. The first one is a brain tumor. It's for tumor, cancer. Second is a lung-related disease. Third is a heart-related disease. Fourth is the brain-related disease. And the fifth one is chronic respiratory disease. So in the other words, something related to our lungs causing, the fatality of the Hong Kong citizen. You can imagine if you're at the noon time, like at the Central, Causeway Bay, or Mong Kok, you can see how many people are standing on the pavement waiting to cross the street. And then how much, those emissions you are breathing in. Okay? If you think of this idea, you will understand even we are less than perfect, like the EV vehicle or the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. We are maybe still using, some, fossil fuel to charge up those things. But however, you reduce the roadside emission, it helps the Hong Kong government to reduce a lot of bills, a lot of money for the health issues. Okay, so that's the important point why we are still, pushing forward. Even we are making the hydrogen from hydrocarbon, but still we want to contribute first, to have this kind of hydrogen vehicle, fuel cell vehicle on the street. Later on, if there are some economic or cheap or reasonable price of green hydrogen come to Hong Kong, we can still use our pipeline to transport through Hong Kong area. Okay, so we need to kickstart, start first, and then and then transform to a greener economy at a later time. Okay, so at the moment, there are some, projects we are now discussing. Of course, the government projects, the two metropolis, and also some airport, and also the bus station. So as I mentioned, there are many stakeholders. They are willing, even the government not yet give them a lot of support, but they are very willing, to initiate, to start up these things. Okay, so last but not the least, actually, we also have some funding. Okay, to support, everyone, okay, even local or overseas universities or agency or scientists, if they have good ideas about renewable energy, carbon capture, hydrogen technology, or battery storage, anything do good for this planet, we are willing to support their research. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Right. I mean, it's kind of exciting in Hong Kong that we have these opportunities. We just see how we can capitalize on them. Well, maybe I can invite Albert Wong from the Science Park, looking at it from an innovation and technology point of view. Thank you.
Hi, I promised that it will be 5 minutes and it will be one chart. Actually, I prepared a few charts, but I'm just going to talk about one thing, and this is it. So I can give you some background about what we do. We have about 1,100 companies in the Science Park right now, 18,000 working population. Of the 18,000, about 11,000 of them are research and development. So we are a microcosm of what Hong Kong is all about. Young people, a lot of buildings. We have like 30 buildings, and we also run the industrial estates, Taipo, Yunnan, Cheung Kwan O. So to us, we think that there are three things that we need to do. Number one, we need to adopt technology to drive sustainability. We are the first one who used MIC for construction in Hong Kong. The InnoCell was constructed using MIC. It was a difficult project. It actually cost a lot more than a traditional construction, but we did that. So a lot of people are following us doing MIC construction, and I'm sure people know that building is the number one emission problem, and we are adopting a lot of new technologies in terms of like HVAC. I'm not sure you know that HVAC technology is 120 years old. There's been only incremental improvement in the past 120 years. And there are new technologies that are coming around, and we are the one to adopt a lot of new technologies in the facility management, in the new buildings. That's number one thing that we do. We're going to build more buildings, and we're going to adopt new technologies, although they're going to cost more money. And we are telling them that the team that although it costs more money, in the long run, it brings more business benefit. So the number one thing that we need to do is to use technology to drive sustainability. And then the other number two things that we do is that the Science Park itself is a community of 18,000 people, a 22 hectare of land. It is a perfect testing ground for new ideas. And we're actually doing a lot of those, including I was talking about MIC, but also we did smart lampposts, and we also do recyclable, edible, biodegradable utensils. One of the things that I really drive myself is that in the pandemic, there are a lot of people who go to buy lunch and using lunch boxes, and I personally will go out with my bag and my container. And in the next 2-3 months, we're going to give out biodegradable utensils and boxes to the restaurants. Because think about it, 18,000 working population, everybody has to eat. We talk about thousands of boxes that are happening there. And we're also adopting new HVAC district cooling system to drive sustainability. I think the number three things that is the last point is that Science Park itself, we're committing to achieving the target by science-based target by 2030 and 2050. However, I think that we need to achieve the actual net zero target. Somehow we need to reverse the trend of carbon. And we talked about it a lot with the board and with a lot of people. Right now, what we see is that all we do would be to reduce. All right? We're not gonna go back and go to zero, unless some sort of technology would happen. And I'm sure most of you in here would have been reading some of the journals or articles that some of the science are actually working, but they're too expensive, way too expensive. I've heard crazy ideas, including some guy told me that they can collect carbon and convert them into rubber. I'm sure from a science standpoint it can work in the laboratories, but how do you make it commercially viable? And one of the things that we, from Science Park standpoint, maybe everyone in the society has to start thinking about is to encourage more of these technologies that could be crazy ideas right now, but in the next 20, 30 years, they will have to reverse the trend. In my opinion, I really think that reversing the trend of carbon is the key, because all we do now is to reduce. You're not going to go to zero unless you can reverse it. And this is the second point, that we need to make use of sustainability to drive innovation technology. And we've been doing this. Of the 1,000 companies in Science Park right now, about 600 of them are startups. And we have a lot of ideas to help them groom their ideas, find the investors, even help them find commercialization. Use the Science Park as a testing ground. And by the way, we have also industrial estates. We have scope 1, 2, and 3. So we are one of the, I would say, the word microcosm. We will do a lot of things to help drive new things, try new things. And hopefully in the next 5, 10, 20 years, we'll come up with some new ideas and we'll make it work. So this is a very quick discussion of what we do, but I am personally seeing a lot of new ideas happening. And like Dawn is saying, if anyone has any new idea that you want to try it out, come talk to us. And we'll definitely give you the resources to make it happen. We'll give you not just the resources and money, but also the place to test it out, okay? This is all I have. This is 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So I think we have institutions in Hong Kong that are open to working together with other people. So don't forget the science park if you have some weird idea. The last one in this pack is Eli. You're going to integrate mitigation and adaptation for us.
This? Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay, so you've heard quite a lot already from a lot of people who have a lot to say and know quite a lot. So what do you need to hear from me is the question, and I'm not really quite sure, but I'm going to give it a shot. Here in Hong Kong, we're living in a city that's a triumph of civil engineering. That enabled high densities, building on the sides of hills, large amounts of land reclamation, of course. That engineering-led approach was certainly appropriate for its era. It was very advanced when climate change wasn't yet known. But this paradigm, which is now tightly woven together into a system that's supported by policies and practices across the public and private sectors, requires a lot of material for continued land reclamation, for concrete for land preparation, for site works, for building foundations, for slope stabilizations, and of course in buildings themselves. And it's driven also an astonishingly low amount of green open space in the built-up areas that are across the city. Of course, it's also, in its defense, it's also enabled densities that make an exciting and iconic cityscape, a place that for many people is already a 15-minute city. And it created the opportunity, as you heard from Gill earlier, to tie land use and transport together, which is very, very unusual anywhere in the world. All of these things are things to celebrate. Particularly, I would call out the rail and property model, which has contributed to that world-class public transport mode share, low car ownership, and the resulting low per capita emissions, at least from local transport. But looking at it today, we can see we have a climate change mitigation problem, right? Lots of concrete, lots of air conditioning, a public realm that drives people indoors, particularly during the summer, a transport system that is probably the best in the world when it comes to public transport mode share, but yet somehow prioritizes the private car when it comes to things like parking requirements and our approach to designing roads. And as an aside, you'll have just seen from Michael's presentation that roads are 4.2% of Hong Kong's land, and all residential uses are only 3.9%. In other words, we use more land for cars than we do for putting people and giving them housing. Think about that. So that's mitigation. We also have a climate change adaptation problem. We've got development close to the city and potentially at risk, very much at risk from sea level rise. I'm not going to be able to sleep after Debra's presentation. We've got a lot of concrete that's been poured on slopes and that covers urban areas, and that prevents absorption of the heavier rains that we know that we have to expect as a result of climate change. We have a built environment with a significant urban heat island effect that's already dependent on air conditioning, and it's just going to become less hospitable as the climate heats up. So we know that we need to transform ourselves for a low carbon near present. And I don't want to say a low carbon future because we don't have time to look at the future. We need to be making more progress now. That gives us an imperative as well as an opportunity to reimagine how our city develops. So can we reimagine our development paradigm so that we tread more lightly on the earth when we're constructing it? Can a new way of city making also create a better living environment that not only reduces embodied carbon, but also reduces that urban heat island effect that drives so much air conditioning use, that would make the outdoor areas more livable during the summer months, make the public transport system greener and more efficient, and prevent the current rise that we're seeing in car ownership? Because after all, even electric vehicles have a heavy embodied carbon footprint. So it's not just enough to say we're going to take all of our cars and we're going to move them to electric. You're still buying cars and building lots of batteries, and you got to get electricity into those cars. We need to increase the capacity of urban areas to absorb rainwater from those heavier rainfalls that we know we can expect to see. We need to avoid building in floodplains and in areas susceptible to sea level rise. We need to contribute to health, longevity, happiness, improved social outcomes. We have a very high Gini coefficient. Can we tackle that in some way through the built environment? And I think this is where planning and urban design come together, and they give us an opportunity to think again what we do and how we do it. Urban design is by nature multidisciplinary. It brings together planning, transport planning, landscape architecture, engineering. It considers aesthetic aspects as well as health, environment, economic concerns in the city. And we in Hong Kong lead in a number of areas. We're not very good, frankly, I don't think, as Hong Kong about talking about the things that we're really great at and telling the world about it. But we're also behind in a number of areas, and we need to be honest with ourselves about that, and we need to put effort into articulating the vision for both the new and the existing areas of the city, who they're for and what these places are like qualitatively and quantitatively. It's particularly true for the Northern Metropolis. We were hearing about that, where if we're going to attract people to want to live there, we might need to be thinking about things like larger flats, or how are we going to create higher quality urban space to contribute to higher quality of life. It's an interconnected and a complex system. And one of the challenges, I think, is to figure out how we unpick what's currently a very tightly tied knot. That's not easy. We should be thinking perhaps about how some elements of a future vision could do that. The good news is that we can draw on plenty of best practice from around the world. We can take inspiration from other places, but also we're doing good things here. And I have great praise for what the government is doing, for example, with renaturalizing nullahs. It's good for the land, it's good for biodiversity, it's good for people, it future-proofs for the climate. Fantastic. Let's use that imaginatively and develop that vision for the city, then pull everyone together to ask what we need to change to be able to achieve it, because it's going to require change. It's going to require looking at things differently. So look, let me wrap up. Let's ask some what-if questions, looking at specific ways into our system, our current system of urban development. You know, what are the opportunities? So what if, work with me here, what if we decide we want to declare war on the urban heat island effect? Now, the good news is that the parallel session is actually asking exactly that. But think about it. That probably means less space for cars and trucks. It means more priority on walking. It means changing how we regulate our streets and our driving culture to properly enable bicycling and personal mobility devices, or PMDs. It means more green and everyday open space, which we're going to need if we're going to adopt the sponge city approach after all. It means changes to buildings so we don't have a bazillion air conditioning units spilling lots of heat out onto above our streets, right? And we're probably going to have to mandate bike parking and showers in offices, which we don't. Maybe we want to encourage more social mixing while we're at it, and that might mean integrating social and private housing, which is done elsewhere, but we don't tend to do it much here. Or what if, a couple of what ifs, right? What if we look abroad, look at the Cheonggyecheong in Seoul, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The government uncovered an existing river which had been covered over by a highway. The traffic actually got better. Or in Paris, where the mayor used the opportunity of COVID to turn one of the major streets, the iconic Rue de Rivoli, from a one-way urban road which had 6 lanes of traffic plus 1 lane of parking, to a street, not a road, but a street now, that is buses, 1 lane of cars and trucks, and 2 directions of bikes and PMDs. And it's incredibly human-friendly. And you know, you don't need to have, it's not about the car, it's about the people. So what if we put our roads on a diet and put the roads and turn them into streets? Particularly in new areas. Say we use less land for roads and for parking. What if we, swap around those statistics around the percentage of land use? What if we swap that around, introduce parking maximums, give the freed up land to green open space or to buildings which have bigger living spaces? What if? What if we think really systemically about how we use concrete? And this is one that I haven't figured out by any means, and I'm sure there are smart people in the world in the room who can. What if we were to take a big step and follow the changes in the International Building Code, used elsewhere, and other national codes to allow timber construction of buildings? That actually sequesters carbon. That would mean lighter buildings. It would mean lower densities because the current state of the art in terms of high timber buildings is 25 stories. There's a 30-story one under construction now. But it would also mean lighter foundations. The land itself would require less preparation. That means it's faster to build and it needs less concrete, and it creates opportunities for more green space and more water-sensitive urban design. That allows us in turn to reduce the urban heat island effect, but it still allows us to retain enough density to make the public transport work and to retain that train backbone. Or would a carbon tax solve some of our development problems? So I think what we need to be doing in Hong Kong is simply asking ourselves a couple of brave and maybe silly what-if questions and see where they take us. That's the challenge. We need to consider how all of these different kinds of interventions can work together to improve the current development paradigm and differentiate the Hong Kong urban design such that it tackles our mitigation and our adaptation problems together, provides a better experience with resilient placemaking that works better in concert with the land that we've got. So I'll stop there. I hope that wasn't too much over my 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eli. I knew you were just the right person to kind of do an interesting wrap-up at this stage, so thank you very much. The question is, we have to ask ourselves some interesting but more difficult questions in terms of reimagining what could be. So please, I ask for your indulgence and your patience. We have 3 other speakers from the finance sector, so let's listen to what it means in terms of risk and money. And then instead of a formal break, because we are a little behind time, for anyone who needs to have a little hand wash, please feel free to go. But I think many of you are probably really wanting to say something. So what I suggest is we'll listen to the next 3 speakers, and then we're going to listen to you. So if I can ask Eric and Cindy to come up. You're going to speak together, is that right? Oh, okay. Okay, Eric Hui, and actually Cindy Pao is also present. Both of them are from the data working group. They're both co-chair of this group. They're from the Center for Green and Sustainable Finance of the Green and Sustainable Finance Cross-Agency Steering Group, which is a government group. So we have a group of actually senior people from the financial sector who are crunching these kinds of issues. And the 2 of them today are representing this group, and they're going to share some of their pain with us. Please, Eric.
Thank you, Christine. I feel very honored to speak here together with my peer, Cindy, on behalf of the Data Working Group of the Green and Sustainable Finance Center under CHEST. It's a very long name. So by now, I think you all know that why finance sector is also very interested in climate data, right? As Professor Charles and also Debra talk about, there are substantial damages to our customers' properties, to the public properties. And besides, we also have a role to play to help our customers to transform into a less carbon-intensive industry, and also to support the big adaptation projects. And lastly, indeed, we are also following the international requirements of financial disclosure on sustainability. For example, the ISSB, there are some regulations or standards for us to follow, and we have to make the disclosure by 2025. All right. So we started the project last year, and we have basically looked at 2 categories of risk. The first one is physical risk, and the other one is transition risk. I'll talk about the physical risk a bit, and Cindy will take over the transition risk. Early last year, we did a survey to our finance sector's companies, and we are trying to find out what are the data gaps they have, or we have, when we look at the customer's portfolio, how to assess portfolio. We have come up with 6 physical risk categories here. The first one is, of course, the historical catastrophe losses, whether we can have higher transparency, more data on typhoon, flooding, etc., particularly like landslides. And the second group of physical risk is about the microclimate condition, for example, precipitation, and also this storm surge thing, whether we can provide greater district granularity for us to assess. And the third one is about precise geographic information. Right now we are having different kind of description of our own properties, our own asset class, but can we actually provide a very precise geospatial data to define this asset. This is something we are looking for. And the next challenge is about resilience. We talk about resilience, but how well the finance sector can look at the resilience factors, be it for landslide or for typhoon, that can be available for different districts or for different buildings even. Yeah? And the next one, insurance costs and claims. In the past, indeed, insurers have been providing resilience service to the community, the economy, and the lives for centuries. They have lots of data, but it's not very organized for use for other sectors. So how can we get this data for assessing physical risk? And the last one is death and accident figures. So under extreme weathers, under extreme heat, for example, how are people being affected by the heat or by the dust on road? Yeah? So, and with this data, we can also think about the second order degree of impact, for example, on workforce, loss of workforce. This is something we are also carrying on. So what we have come up with, the first one is the data source repository. We have got lots of data sources, relevant ones, and put into a single data repository system that's hosted on the Hong Kong MA website. And also we are doing an SME questionnaire that Cindy will talk about. This is a very busy slide, don't read it. And just to share with you that there are many data collected, and special thanks to the government departments like Hong Kong Observatory here, and also CEDD and Drainage Services. They're all very supportive for us, to us to collect all this data and to make this available for sectors to use. And also, this already publicized last year, so it's actually open to public for now, or for banking or finance sectors. So what's the next step? We'll continue to work on data gaps. Indeed, on the data gaps, it's also talking about the format of data, how we make sure that they are machine readable. And also, for example, we're also working on the loss data, the economic loss data from the insurance industry. The Hong Kong Federation of Insurers are actively looking at a model with a consultant how to get this data out for other sectors' benefit. And also, we're looking at the possibility of having a data tool. You know, it's always easy to have a scoring, grading thing for assessment, right? So we're also looking at that and to see whether we can build a data scoring tool that we can assess based on some geospatial data of a property. That's what we will try to achieve. All right, now, that's less than 5 minutes, I believe. I'll pass the time to Cindy.
Thank you, Eric. So I think just now Eric has mentioned we have identified certain data gaps and data needs from the industry. So based on these, we relating to transition risk, mainly are relating to carbon emission, carbon price, and also the technology to help the company to predict, and also how ready these companies are in order to transit through. Okay, so in order to address these data needs and pain points, the data group has formed and addressed mainly 3 sectors: the financial institutions, the insurers, and also the asset managers. So we are focusing on some of the use cases which are related to the exposure quantifications, the making the investment and lending decisions, as well as the climate risk related disclosure, and also the scenario analysis and stress testing. So when we identify the data sources in order to resolve these data pain points, we have a certain principle to follow. So one is this data must be able to help us to fulfill the international standard, reporting standard. Secondly, it must be coming from a non-profit organization data source in order to avoid any conflict of interest. And last but not the least, of course, ease to consume and also to collect this information is also one of the critical elements that we consider. And we also want to provide a one-stop solutions to do the reporting for the companies. So these are the basic principles that we are looking for the data source. So what is our approach in order to address these data needs and identify these data sources? So we leverage on the existing data working groups. In fact, the existing data working groups is formally based on a very diverse group of people. We have consultants, we have people from financial institutions, we have people from university professors, and also the asset managers. So among all those, we leverage on their networks and explore whether there is any available data in the market that is relating to the SME company of the transition risk. But unfortunately, after we have exhausted all those exploring, we can't find any readily available information related to the SME for transition risk. So how are we going to address these data pain points? Eventually, we think that the most likely viable option for us to resolve this pain point is to directly collect those information from the clients. But how are we going to collect this information from the clients? So are we going to scratch from zero and create our own database and data set for us, or how are we going to reach out to these customers and how to reach out to this customer? So eventually we explore in the market. And finally, we think that it's better for us to collaborate with an experienced industry players, which is CDP. As many of you may notice that they are having very extensive experience in collecting this data and also doing the analysis of this data. So how are we going to approach? We are going to have a tailored template made for using a tiering approach. Why tiering? Because the readiness of those SME and also the size of SMEs are varied. Some are very micro size, and some are not even heard about the climate risk impact on their companies. So that's why we created three tier set of questionnaires. One is the most shortest one and also simple one. And the other side is talking about a more comprehensive template to cater for these different size and also different readiness of the companies in order to lower the hurdle for them to submit this information to us. And regular maintenance is also very important for us, okay? Because we need to make sure that those information that we obtain through these questionnaires are always aligned with the latest published standard and also can help to capture the latest development in the transition risk-related area. So finally, training. Training is also very important because, as you may also notice, that as a financial institution, when we reach out to our clients, just now I'm discussing with Kelvin, even though the SME, they are very willing and eager to address the transition risk, but many of those, they don't have the knowledge and they don't even understand what is it about transition risk and how does it impact their business and also the longer term of financial performance of their company. So that's why we are also providing some foundational training to equip those SME and as an incentive for them to submit this information to us. And how are we going to do it? And the best way to do based on the feedback from the working group is we will ask the relationship manager to share with the client to fill in this information. And in the questionnaire, we will also provide some guidance to guide these SME to make sure they fully understand the intention behind and also the objective of those questions in order for us to collect quality data for our future usage. So what is the next step? So when we put in place this tailored first version of questionnaires, we have done a trial one to go through with some of the actual clients through the relationship manager and use that feedback to enhance our existing first version of our template. And this template will be released to the industry-wide adoption shortly, probably in first quarter of next year. And then based on this initial round of data collection, we will further enhance our existing template in order to bring everyone on the speed and also make the client journey better. Okay. Secondly, we will also explore to develop a bilingual version. The reason is because we also get the feedback from the relationship manager and also the client. Maybe the Chinese version will help them easier to understand the question that we are asked, and they will be able to provide a better answer to address our need. And it will also pave way for us to reach out to the SMEs in China as well, because we are very closely work together in China. Some of the suppliers are actually having the plants and also their company in China. So with the Chinese version will also help us to broaden the data that we collect in the future so that we can utilize it for. And last but not the least, that is the most key part and key challenge that we are facing. How are we going to incentivize those SME to submit this information to us? Because right now, as you may also notice, that there is very little incentive in terms of monitoring and returns to the SME or the company who are proactively manage the climate risk or transition risk. But I think this is a journey that we need to collaborate among the key stakeholders in the ecosystem, not just the financial institutions, but also the government as well as the client itself. So work together, hopefully we will have a better future and get more comprehensive data for us to manage this risk. So this is a journey. We are now only at the beginning point, and hopefully we will progressing well, and together we can get more informative information. Another incentive to the SME to come up with this data to us is the government, and also collaborate with some other like university or even for insurance company. We are going to build some tools to help these SME to measure the risk that they are facing. So hopefully with all those incentives we are going to put together will help us to incentivize these SME to start doing this data submission to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I suspect most of you don't know they exist, right? Most of you don't know they exist. Now that you know there is a group of people organized by the government to discuss these things, and they want to collect a lot more data, particularly SMEs, and many of you are SMEs. So our last speaker is a banker. He's going to tell us, because I think Cindy gave him a message, right? You know, your relationship manager, you're going to talk to all your clients, you know, how are we going to do surveys, collect a lot of data, make sense of them. Kelvin AU from BEA is going to maybe share us his pain about how he's going to work with his customers, which are people like yourselves in your corporate form.
Okay, thank you, Christine. I'm Kelvin AU from Bank of East Asia. Among these so-called sponsors list, I'm only one bank, so that's why I'm here. Okay, usually when a banker speaks, people think it's boring, but luckily we usually speak about money, so people are interested in it. And then today I would like to share with you a few groups of numbers, and that would I conclude my presentation very quickly. One said 2030 and 2050. These are the 2 years that are very important, because many banks or many institutions are talking about getting net zero by 2030 or 2050, right? For banks, usually we have set a target of achieving scope 1 and 2 net zero by 2030, and this is what BEA is doing. And we have set ourselves a vision to achieve net zero, total net zero, by 2050. Okay, so is it easy? The second set of figure is 3 and 99%. What are they? Okay, I talk about scope 3 net zero. Everyone knows about scope 1, 2, and 3 now. For banks, actually, it is very important for us to talk about the scope 3, because our carbon emissions is largely on scope 3. 99% of a normal bank's carbon emission is actually on scope 3. That means we lend money to people, you guys. We lend money to institutions. And then these borrowers will have their carbon footprint. And that will be counted in our scope 3 carbon emission. And it accounts for 99%. So if we want to achieve the net zero by 2050, that means we have to manage all you guys' carbon emission very wisely by 2050. So we are very interested in all those mitigation, adaptation strategies of all you guys. The third set of number is plus 130%, and then 300 to 1. What are they? In BEA, in the past 12 months, we have grown our green finance balance, not balance, but the percentage of our total loan balance. So the percentage has grown up by 130%. It's quite a lot, okay, optically. But today we saw a lot of like strategies or examples about adaptation. Actually, in the whole world, there's a survey showing that when banks land on the green or sustainability area, $300 would go into the normal green finance or sustainability finance, but only $1 to adaptation-related areas. Why? It's because we don't know how to do it, because we don't have the data. For example, when we are talking about landslide, the risk of that kind of physical risk, if someone is borrowing something to protect the slope, is it a green finance? I don't know how to define it. Right. So all these figures are going to drive the business agenda of a normal bank, of a commercial bank in the coming decades. And so that's why today we're here, we have learned a lot. And luckily, Hong Kong MA is also leading some, having some concerted efforts to address these areas, because really all those SMEs are struggling. They would like to be more green, but they're struggling to know their own carbon footprint as a start. Just like in this room, what is the carbon footprint today because of having a one-day seminar, right? So that's all from me. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, there are two buses that will leave here to take you back into town. The first one leaves at 5:15, and the second one leaves at 5:30. So we had promised that we'd finish at about 4:45. So let's make the best use of the next period of time. Now, just so that we can perhaps manage our time better, the first group, right? Also, a first group will include the government, the planning department. How many of you would like to make comments? Not necessarily ask questions, but how many of you would like to comment or ask questions of that group? Just show your hand. 3, 4, okay, 4 people, or 4 or 5 people, yeah, half a dozen people. How many would like to put questions or make comments of the second group? 1, 2, okay, about 4 or 5 people. And the last group, the finance group. Oh, okay, so it seems like that we have pretty even number of people wanting to ask questions or make comments. But of course, as they respond, you may have more comments you wish to make. So can I invite the first group, including government, to just sit in front so that the people who had put your hand up just now, perhaps we can focus on questions or comments in that area that you have for them. May I ask you for your show of hands again of those people who would like to ask questions? There's a lady at the back. Number 1. Number 2, Chu Ying. Number 3, Tan Yao. Number 4. Number 5. Okay, you remember your number? Anybody else? Remember your number 6, your number 7, your number 8, yes? Yeah, okay, 8 people. Number 1, the lady at the back.
Good afternoon. So this is Kitty from WWF Hong Kong. So this morning we heard from Professor Zhai, from the co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 1, that biodiversity is part of the climate resilient development. And then in COP27, actually many countries, they have already recognized the importance of nature-based solution. And in the current COP15, the biodiversity conference, they are also talking about a global goal for our nature. So I would like to ask whether how nature-based solution can be included in the existing city environment, because today I heard a lot about a good job of the Hong Kong government did in the natural environment, but how about in the urban area, urban setting, apart from just building more trees? Thank you.
The second question, we're going to take your questions together. Number 2, who was number 2? Chiu Ying.
Yes, I'm Lam Chiu Ying, CY Lam, not CY Lam. It's a conceptual question. In the planning for 2030 plus, it seems that it has been based on an assumption that for economic growth, you need a lot of roads and railway and so on. But then to mitigate climate change, you really have to adopt a new model for economy. It should be decoupled from carbon emission, growth without emission. So we really need to have less roads, less railway, less movement to achieve greater economic expansion. So I just wonder if we need some fundamental change in this thinking within the government. So just a conceptual question.
Oh, but maybe also conceptual thinking amongst ourselves, right? Not just the government, but ourselves. Okay, number 3. Who was number 3, please?
Hello, thank you for your presentations this afternoon. They were very informative. I have one question regarding planning in Hong Kong, and that's whether the government support for the sponge city concept mean that conversion of green landscapes for residential development is now off the table for the foreseeable future, since that would decrease the capacity to absorb extreme rainfall events as well as exacerbate the urban heat island effect. And then I have another question regarding forest regeneration. So we know that closed canopy forest is still rare, very rare in Hong Kong, even after 70 years of relatively undisturbed succession after the deforestation in World War II. So I'm just wondering if the soils are still even capable of supporting closed canopy forest. And finally, I have a question for Ms. Tan. So, while apocalyptic imagery in Causeway Bay is fun, we know that other coastal cities, for example, in the Netherlands, have been several meters below sea level for a very long time and have been engineering solutions for just as long. So is there anything that constrains Hong Kong from adopting similar engineering solutions? Thank you very much.
Number 4, please.
Okay. Thank you. I am Chong Chen Yao. I'm running an NGO called Carbon Care InnoLab. So we are going to launch a just transition report which covers how community responds to climate change. So there is a disconnect, it seems, and that we are in adaptation, we are focusing on infrastructure, even town planning, but we are not dealing with the increased heat waves on outdoor workers, those living in partition houses, flats, or disaster response for those who are with disabilities. So even the UN in-Thai framework on disaster response covered a disability dimension. So all these and other vulnerable groups are not being in the picture of climate adaptation discussion from morning to this afternoon so far. It might be covered in workshop B, but
it is, Chen Yao. It is in workshop B.
Oh,
yes.
okay, but we should connect, right? We should not pigeonhole. Okay, so I raise here. Okay, that's number one. Number two, that more important. So give me a minute, because the message of urgency and crisis was very well articulated by Zhang Ximing this morning. Right, we are on the high road to help with our foot on the accelerator. But when we listen to this afternoon, I mean, we have Debra quoting the sea rises and so on. But the government seems to me is still not responding to these agencies, because the secretary this morning said, instead of phasing out fossil fuel, phasing out coal, which is in the plan, in the Hong Kong neutrality plan, he said this morning, phasing down. Well, there is this distinction, phasing out and phasing down, in the international negotiation in COP. CCIL have sent a young delegation to COP. I hope some of the young people are here so they can ask questions. But we are downplaying the urgencies by this kind of language. We are not speeding up, increasing the 2030 target of reduction, which is what is being advised by the IPCC. So we are still postponing it. So I will leave it at that. I hope people can respond. Are we still very politely saying, yes, we know the crisis, but we are not going to avoid it, okay? So I think this is what we are doing right now.
Thank you. Number 5? Yes, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. This is Alan from CEDD Portworx. Actually, I'm not asking questions. I'm just want to share something about the government's work on adaptation. First of all, I listened to speaker talk about some extreme value about the sea level rise. And actually, the government has taken this into account in our updating of the menu. Actually, in August this year, we have updated our Portworx design manuals and also the design manual about the extreme design seawater level, which has taken into account the very high greenhouse gas emission scenario in our design. The point is that we are adopting a progressive adaptive approach in this gender, because we have taken into account the overseas practice in this area. For example, the UK, New York, etc. We are not going to apply the extreme value in one go. We are not at day one to apply such extreme design value in our design. We will closely monitor the value, the climate change scenario, and also the climate change study findings. And then, in the good timing, we based on the observed trend of climate change and the study findings, we will update the design requirements progressively. At this moment, we have updated for the century end, the sea level rise. Actually, our design magnitude, our design requirement has been increased up to 1 meter, above 1 meter high. I mean the sea level increase in the extreme weather condition. This is not the end of the story, actually. We are going to doing some studies, undergoing some study actually at this moment. For example, we have doing the solar management study on solar management plan, which will determine assess the long-term, the short to long-term impact, the coastal impact on the infrastructures, as well as the different climate change scenarios. We hope that this study will give us some hints on the design and land use planning and the long-term coastal defense strategy. I think
I'm just wondering whether actually today we can settle the use of language, right? I'm hearing from you the word progressive. I'm hearing from you not incremental, right? And I'm just wondering, I'm just wondering whether we can settle this issue. I don't hear from this morning from CEDD that you are not using the IPCC. I mean, you are using the international science, right, in terms of projection. You're not denying what Debra is saying in terms of the trajectory, right, of possible speed of sea level rise. But you're saying that it shouldn't be incremental. What you're saying sounds like to her to be incremental, whereas you're saying it's actually progressive. Now, I'm not going to go on. I'm going to let you respond a little later. I just want it clear in my own mind whether you're in fact saying something the same or extremely similar. Okay, next question. There was somebody else? Question? There was some, yes?
Thank you. This is Tina. I'm working from financial sector. It is mentioned about that most of the emissions of banking industry are from the scope 3 finance emissions.
Can we wait? Your question is number 3, later.
Okay.
Is it
Sure.
right? I'm going to take pack 1 first. The question that you would like these people to respond to.
Okay,
yeah?
okay, then I pass them
A little bit later then.
session.
Yes, please hold your question. Anybody else for this? The lady over there. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Oh, shall I just do it now quickly?
Please.
Thank you for the presentations. Very good. I was very interested to see Debra's imagery around the different projections, and I'm just wondering, you know, how do we eventually come to an agreement on what level of preparedness we actually need? That's my key question. And then, what can government and the private sector do to collaborate and agree on that?
Right. So I think that was the question I was also trying to summarize.
That's my,
yes. Was another hand? Sorry. One over there, 2 last questions, yeah? One here and one there.
Hello, this is Beyond from WWF, and I work in Micro Nature Reserve. And obviously, I'm very supportive to what Michael introduced. And in the whole morning, what I can hear is about the improvement in infrastructure so that Hong Kong can be resilient to the climate change, sea level rise. But it seems that we don't have or don't really allocate enough resources to AFCD, sorry. Because obviously, what Michael introduces, wetlands and also the reforestation can help sequestrate carbon so that the government can achieve the goal. But it seems that in the morning, there are quite a lot of resources for CEDD or DSD to improve the infrastructure. But how about the natural or the nature-based solutions that we are now having? I really hope that the government can allocate more resource to AFCD so that they can work more in restoring some abandoned fish ponds back into the natural wetlands and also doing more in reforestation. Yes, just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Last question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hermia. I am a student at the Chinese University. I'm also one of the youth delegate followed Chen Yao to COP last year. So it consists of one question and one comment. The first question is regarding the Kaichao reclamation project. We heard a lot about from the AFCD today talking about the carbon sink in Hong Kong. I mean, to protect our nature environment to improve the carbon sink in Hong Kong. And is there any comparison analysis on whether the Kaichao project, the reclamation, the damage done by the reclamations could compensate by the future amazing carbon neutral cities that will be built on it? To me, that concept still sounds like a development first, conservation next approach, which we don't really hope to see in Hong Kong anymore. Next will be more of a comment. This morning, we have a lot of government officials from different departments talking about Christine's question regarding engagement with youth. It is a little bit disappointing of their response regarding a lot of them is visit tours based or education based. We're not actually engaging, involving the youth audience, the younger generations into the process, the decision-making process of a lot of these initiatives, and that is quite a waste of talent, I would say. We really hope to engage more with the government officials of different sectors in Hong Kong, but really engage, involve, include young people in the process instead of just consulting us. Thank you very much.
Right, maybe I can just add something here. Part of our job at HKUST with CARE2022 is to write a summary report. So I know that not just the youth, but especially the youth, many people in our community would like to be more engaged with government policy making. So government has a kind of structure, right? These various committees and so on. But I'd like you to think about, so I can put it in my report, how would you like to be engaged in this new era of climate change? So I think for the government, they have these set pieces, right? As you say, you know, different visits, school talks, and so on. And I think government is genuinely thinking about how to engage youth. But perhaps maybe some ideas coming from the youth. How do you think you could be engaged? That might be also helpful, right? So perhaps, Gill, you might like to also respond to part of these questions about how to design transport, right? You know, so please feel free to comment and pick the questions you might not be able to answer everything, yeah. But Charles, you go first.
Perhaps I start first because I don't have any conflict of interest. I'm just a university professor. And to start with, I'd like to talk about science first. Okay, about prediction. How many meters of water level rise? Okay, any theoretical prediction has two uncertainties. One is model uncertainty. The other one is input parameter uncertainty. Model uncertainty means what? Means you are certain assumption you can make, theoretically make a certain assumption so that you can derive the solution. And in order to do calculation, you also require input parameters so that you can give you a number. So I've been UST for 28 years. All the model predictions subject to a lot of uncertainty. That's a fact, okay? Now, when we come to, I was frightening, heard that 8 meters of water level rise. Now, if that prediction is correct, what's the consequences? And all the MTR tunnels must shut down immediately because the buoyancy, okay? A lot of buildings must lock down now, okay? So let's think about it, is it possible? Okay, and the crunch is the prediction. That's why I sort of think we've got to be sensible, understand the assumption behind the prediction, okay, and the risk and the uncertainty behind the prediction, and then take action sort of progressively. Now, let me give you another example. Before 1977, before the establishment of GCO, Geotechnical Engineering Control Office, do you know how many slopes were classified unsafe? Thousands, okay? And since 1977, government put a lot of money to upgrade those slopes progressively without letting you know, okay? That's another one example. Another example in recent years, about 10 years ago, or maybe 15, buildings department, they recognize our buildings has to design against earthquake load as well. Okay, but in the past, we never consider earthquake because we know it's dominating loading. And then based on their study, they say really we should introduce new building code, okay, allow for certain mild earthquakes design. Now, if we implement immediately, that means all the buildings have to lock down. Right. So I think we've got to be sort of get a proactive, balanced view, rather than jump into 8 meters and do something. Okay. Now, indeed, if 8 meters is indeed correct, okay, we ought to also have to think about how to do it. Okay, that's my comment.
Debra, maybe you'd like to respond, because I think Charles also shared some perspective on this point.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we're saying is that you're not supposed to immediately adapt to this now. But it's really the difference between the wordings also. It's really about it's about the end point, right? So it's really like, if we look forward into the future, the IPCC is sort of saying, use a longer term time frame, because sea level rise could accelerate in the second half of the century instead of a shorter time frame. So for example, if I start planning today and I say, okay, sea level rise could be 0.5 meters by 2050, then I would draw up a certain plan, right? And then that would set in plan line, okay, then you will adapt this and you'll build this, and so on. But then at 2050, or say 10 years time or 15 years time, something else happens and you go like, oh my God, it's accelerated. Then it's hard to change that plan because you've just planned up to 0.5. So what the IPCC is recommending is that you take the longer time frame and you start at a higher number. So in 2100, it could be now, and there's a range because science is not perfect, anywhere from 1 at the worst case scenario to the now cannot be ruled out scenario, which I think for Hong Kong off the top of my head is closer to 2.6 meters, right? So anywhere along that range, you could sort of say, now if I was going to plan for 2.6 meters or 1 meter is very different, because you saw on the map, 1 meter was hardly anything, 2.6 meters is quite different. So I would come up with a different plan today for 2.6 meters. I may not choose to invest in certain areas, and I may choose to sort of like phase them out. And I may sort of say, right, whatever I build today for 10 years time or whatever, if I'm going to be building 2 meters or 3 meters in the future, then I have to make sure the foundation supports that, right? So it allows for more flexible ratcheting up of this. So IPCC sort of says, so you could call that progressive adaptation as well, but what the IPCC doesn't want is incremental short-term adaptation, because that's very rigid and it locks you in. Now, prediction is an art, not a really, it's a science, but So I think to Christie's question, I think where you will end up, which is why I sort of say it's a risk appetite. If it's a very critical asset, like the port, like the airport, sorry, there's airport and port is over here. The airport has got pushing to a H++ scenario for 2100. So they're looking at around a 2 meter sea level rise by 2100 and working backwards from that. The port I hear from CD is like Alan saying that he's looking at 1 meter and working back from that, but that 1 meter could be in review. So typically for critical infrastructure like the port and airports, people will be looking at 2 meters to 3 meters of sea level rise and working back. That's not saying that you need to build that infrastructure today, but it's just that you need to plan for that multi-meter eventuality. Right. As for the 8 meters of sea level rise, this is just science saying that they've locked it in. And so the best thing is to look back at what the Earth was doing the last time we were at 1.1 degrees. The last time the Earth was at 1.1 degrees, sea levels were 6 to 9 meters higher. And the last time we were at about 400 over parts per million in terms of carbon emissions, the Earth sea level rise was 25 meters higher. So basically, we're not saying that all of that is going to happen today. It will slowly happen. When we started working on sea level rise research, we didn't think that multi-meter sea level rise would happen until 2300. And then suddenly, you read all this stuff that's happening in the polar ice caps, and you're like, oh my God, it's going to be in my lifetime. It could be in my lifetime. And so this is just here to sort of like guide planning
no,
in the future.
I think what I'm hearing is you'd like there to be a bigger buffer, right, for safety. Now, there's a cost involved in that. When you want to apply that cost is something we can discuss, right? But what I'm not hearing today is actually I don't hear a fundamental conflict between what you're all saying. Yeah. And
I think there's no, yeah.
And I hope going forward that you can kind of have more discussion so that in Hong Kong we all feel comforted that there is, as much as possible, guided by science. I mean, my God, it could be more than 8, right? 8 meters, my God. So what I'm saying is let's tune ourselves into having that very important discussion, particularly for critical infrastructure. Okay, we need to kind of move on a bit. And I'm wondering, Michael, because you have a lot of fans out there, and I know you're not the government, but maybe Mr. Ng will also say something later. Biodiversity, you know, you're one of the experts in Hong Kong on what to do. A minute or two on what you would do if you were the government.
Wow. Restore the forest and restore the wetlands. That would help to mitigate.
And what would that take today? I mean, what would your policy be to reforest, for example?
We need a policy set up by the government. We need government different departments to allocate the land, like AFCD allocate those barren hillside within the country parks. And also a lands department allocate lands, the hillsides in the northern metropolis, so to speak. Hill fire fighting is very, very important. So rather than establishing fire break along the boundary of country parks, you set up a fire break along the source of the fire, like a lot of grave sites. These are known already. So much shorter fire break, easier to manage, and you prevent the fires from becoming a blaze to stop them. Regarding the soil questions about closed canopy forests, we do have closed canopy forests in Hong Kong. Soil is an issue, but we have lots of experience in reforestation by the Hong Kong government, by KFBG, by the researchers. So they've been adding biochar and stuff. A lot of the young forests we see nowadays are dominated by only a few species of pioneer species, the Machilis. And these bigger old-growth forest tree species fail to colonize because they are very restricted in distribution. That's why in the reforestation plan, we need to collect the seeds, cultivate the seedlings, mobilize the public, get the business to support, and then plant these seedlings in the barren countryside or in some of these young forests.
Okay, thank you. Any last comments from you, Mr. Ng?
There are lots of questions, and I think I can start with Hong Kong 2030 Plus, which is also my project. Tutorially, the direction, I think, nowadays is to have a pedestrian on cycling priority concerning CY question. The difficulty nowadays Hong Kong government is facing is for the local district. I would say the neighborhood level, we will try to do our best in terms of planning to encourage the walking and cycling. And strategically, for the strategic network, which means the big roads from Northwest NT to Kaohsiung or other else, the model itself used by the government department is still very lack of flexibility nowadays. But our strategy is mainly to also similar to adaptation. We plan the road for the moment, depends on whether in the future, if the trip generation from the using car could be reduced, we can use part of the road, just like the COVID in the UK and Europe. We can resume part of the road for open space. This is our strategy for the moment to handle why we have still planned so many roads for road infrastructure. And I'm also the project officer for Kaohsiung Artificial Island. We adopt similar approach for the strategic road. Also, we target to explore the possibility to put most of the road, especially the main roads, underground. So the people can enjoy the grade for open space, leisure and recreation, and the car will go underground. This is also our strategy. Although, in terms of statistics, we also count this as road because we try to use a new term which is called mobility-related facilities, which also include pedestrian, cycle, track, all these will count it as mobility-related uses. For the subdivisional housing or the inadequate housing household in the climate change issue, Hong Kong Chinese Developers is also try to be more inclusive and supportive in this aspect. One of the direction is to sell out the higher living standard, the larger living space, and larger open space and GIC community facilities land provision standard for them and for the overall Hong Kong. And for the Gao-Yee artificial island, in terms of land restoration, we adopt a higher, bigger home, bigger flat size for land restoration. We hope we can do this to in general, encourage the private developer, and also the government will take the lead to have larger homes, more open space, and better community facilities. And in terms of biodiversity, our strategy, I think, although we are not EEB, but we are closely work together. In terms of redevelopment, we need, especially for the old urban area, to enrich the biodiversity, the urban area to us is quite difficult. So Hong Kong Chinese Developers is mainly a concept to enhance the redevelopment of the old urban district and try to thin out the population, to free up more land for the open space, to have better biodiversity in the urban area, old urban area. And for the new projects, such as Gao-Yee Artificial Island, I can say a little bit more. And we have a very comprehensive biodiversity and urban forestry strategy for that. We particularly request the consultant to formulate that strategy, which mainly based on built form, the water, as well as the open space. In response to Michael's concern, we also intentionally create some wetland within the artificial islands because there are some salt water and seawater and surface runoff areas. So we explore whether we can create wetland within the Gao-Yee artificial island. And for the sea level rise issue, I also want to make some comment because we work very hard with HKO. HKO set a very, very demanding scenario testing for a consultant, which is based on AR6 ICCP. Our consultant, I see, is there. The number of scenarios is about over 20 scenarios, up to 150, and a different mix. So our target is use Gao-Yee Artificial Island in terms of carbon neutrality as well as biodiversity for new projects as an exemplar, as well as SGR. This is our target. But many of these, we are still working on it. Okay.
Right. Well, I think if anything, maybe we've settled a little bit of the sea level rise issue today. And I recognize that we haven't dealt with every single question that was asked, but I think the sentiments are clear. Now, we only have about 20 minutes left. So may I invite you to take your seats and the next group, group 2, to come back on in case there are some questions for them. I think there were some hands, right? 1, 2, 3. Yes, can you ask all 3 questions in one go? 1, yes, the lady, 1. Yeah, I know, I see Edmund. There was another person. Yeah, 1, 2, then Edmund here. There's one at the back. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, please. The lady first.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentations. I'm Veronica Lee. I'm an alumna of HKUST and also currently a PhD student at University College London. So first of all, I have one question for Ms. Gill MELLER, which is throughout the presentations today, we've heard that the railway will continue to serve as the backbone of Hong Kong, especially once it is expanded into the Land to Tomorrow development. But firstly, wear and tear is kind of inevitable, and secondly, there have been recent concerns, especially after the derailing issue that happened last month. So my question is, what is the MTR doing to ensure that
their services can be expanded safely, reliably, and sustainably. And my second question is actually for Mr. Albert Wong regarding the HKSTP, which is the HKSTP taking any opportunities to facilitate a circular economy approach to its support of the companies that are undertaking R&D at the park, so that perhaps they could share materials, or that one company's waste can become another company's input. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The second question, and then Edmund. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks a lot. My name is Pascal. Thanks a lot for all the presentations. That was great and very informative. Just one very small question for Ms. Meller as well. It's great to see that you want to add 1 million kilowatt hours of solar PV. That's great. I'm quite sure there is another potential for at least another 1 million kilowatt hours for you. Have you been thinking about technologies such as building integrated photovoltaics as part of your properties? There are studies out there for Hong Kong that could at least produce as much as 25% of the current electricity needs in Hong Kong, and MTR would for sure be one leading example who could be the leader in this technology. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. There's a question here.
Hi, it's Edmund, of Gold Peak Technology Group. I just wonder, if the panel can take one of Ellie's what-if questions of, say, reclaiming more street spaces for citizens' use for healthy and sustainable city development, and turn them into some how may we attempts.
Great. Well, you can take them how you like, but there were tons of questions for you, Gill, and then for Albert, and then Ellie.
So very briefly, we do invest a huge amount of money and time into maintaining our railway assets so that we can continue to provide a reliable service to Hong Kong. It's something like about $8 billion a year. I've got quite a loud voice. About $8 billion a year. And it's very challenging because if you think we only have about 2 hours every evening to maintain and upgrade the assets on the railway so that we can make sure it's open every morning. But just sticking with the climate theme of today, one thing we are really focusing on is adaptation and resilience. So we've been dipping our toes, and my team are here today, into the waters of scenario analysis to look at our higher risk at our high-risk locations, and we're looking at our design standards manual so we can make sure that we are really prepared for perhaps not the 8 meters, but certainly the sea level rise we might see. In terms of PV, I assume what you're talking about is the kind of the glass panels. This is something our CEO loves tech, and he keeps encouraging us to look at those opportunities. So absolutely, we will. One of the challenges I think, though, in Hong Kong is the feed-in tariff scheme, and how particularly, it was really designed for people putting solar panels on their roof. And I think for people like ourselves or the property developers that can look at larger scale renewable energy generation, there needs to be a discussion really with the power companies and probably government as to how those investments are funded, and indeed who gets the green attribute as a result of those. So I think a discussion to be had.
Well, that's definitely
regarding
good to hear.
circular economy, very quickly, we will do our best to do that. We have 1,000 companies, and we also industrial estates, including data centers and factories and everything. There's possibility of doing that, but I think the scale is not big enough. I would challenge whether Hong Kong itself can do that. Yeah, we'll do what we could and show the world what is possible, but the scale is just not quite there yet in terms of industry and everything. But we'll try our best.
Ellie?
I should have introduced myself properly. My name's usually pronounced Eli, but I'll go by Ellie. That's fine. Edmund, I didn't quite catch the gist of the question itself. Was it for us to discuss, or no? How can we take these sort of ethereal ideas and make them into something? It's a good question. I'm a big proponent of futures thinking, where you set up a bunch of scenarios and ask what if, and then try to delve into, first of all, what does that idea mean? If you were to do it, what would be the potential outcomes? Is it worth following? And then, having established perhaps that a particular idea or a set of ideas are worth following, and usually would do this with multiple ideas, then try to break it down. And you usually need a bunch of different people at the table. You need government, and you need the private sector, and you need civil society. You need young and old. You need practitioners and consultants, as well as the people who will be paying for it. You need all of those people around the table to actually unpick what's usually in this kind of case something that's quite already set, as it is the things that I was talking about. Sort of an existing system that's quite set in its ways, and say, well, how are we going to actually deal with this? But that requires that you have the right people at the table, and it requires that they all have sort of thrown off their existing clothing in a way at the door, and that they're prepared to accept what could be quite difficult change, or change that's going to mean really accepting different ways of working than they've usually had. And these are often quite senior people who are quite used to how things are. So it is quite challenging. I think a university environment is a really good place to start to deal with this. We come up again, of course, with the problem of time, which is that do we have enough time to take it out of to bring it into academia, to really deal with it in academia, and then get it out into the real, the real world. Sorry, I shouldn't use that phrase.
Can I make a proposal here? Can I make a proposal here? I think people like to think out of the box, but somebody needs to organize that thinking play, right? We're playing with ideas, play with numbers that are real, and shock us a bit, right? We have more space for roads than for housing, right? Who will organize that? And can we, as a game, right? As a game, as a way of opening our own minds, can we also get our senior government people to come? Can we get our senior built environment people to come, our finance people, our technology? We need people to be willing to spend the time in some organized process where we can play that game that may help us to transform our thinking. I think that's what you're saying. So who is going to do that? I mean, at the university, are we the best people to do that? We could. But this has to be something that we agree to do. I just can't say, okay, come along, have a dinner together, right? Because what I'm saying is, we want this to be transformative, right? Potentially transformative. So we need everybody's ability and willingness to participate. I mean, perhaps this is something that Science Park could take up. I mean, somebody needs to and invest time and human personnel into making something like that work. Sorry, now we only have 10 minutes left. May I actually invite the last group to come, because I think there are a few questions for the finance group. Yes, I think the lady had a question there. Maybe you wouldn't mind asking it again. Please.
Thank you. Yes. This is Tina from financial sector. It is mentioned about that most of the emissions of banking industry are from the Scope 3 finance emission. For example, the lending business with the customers. So it seems that if we want to reduce the emissions, we cannot avoid cutting down our business and the customer profile and relevant business activities. So can you guys share some strategies that how can the company or the financial institutions strike a balance between earning the money and reducing the emissions?
Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes. One. Okay. 1, 2. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for Cindy. This is Merlin from the Business Environment Council. So I just wonder for this SME questionnaire, the dissemination in next year, would that be openly disseminated to all SME, or is it target oriented? I'm asking because actually we are also working with CDP on encouraging more companies to use the disclosure platform, and happen to know that the GSA, you guys are working with CDP to do this questionnaire. I just don't want to create additional view on this. So the question is how would the dissemination of the questionnaire to SME be like? Thank you.
Okay, that was a question here.
Hi, my name is Terence. I'm from a consultant, and also I'm an alumni of Hong Kong UST. We all know about all the pronounced effects of all these climate change effects. And Kelvin, you mentioned about 2030 and 2050. If a client comes to you that, oh, I got a problem in 2100, will you entertain him? Or will you say, go back Maybe I just deal with your 2080 problem first. Have you come across these kind of problems or questions, and can you share something with us? Thank you.
Okay, who would like to go first?
Yeah, okay. Probably I take that question. Yes, 99% of our Scope 3 emissions will be on normal business. So that's why we have to work with our customers on about how to address that transition risk. Because actually, as Cindy has shared, I have shared, many SMEs or many corporations, they have the willingness, the heart to be greener, to be responsible. But do they have the tools? Do they have the knowledge? So this is a part of a bigger agenda. So we are now working with the customers to help them or to help them to help us to manage that emissions. So that's why the SME questionnaire is useful. For example, in Hong Kong, there are 300,000 SMEs. Do you think all of them can calculate their carbon footprint? No. Do you think they know, in addition to changing the light bulb to LED light bulb, what they can do? So they may not know. It's not about they are not willing to, just they may not know what to do. So we are working on that. Okay, so that's why we need a journey. It can't happen. It can't take place overnight. But everybody, at least in the banking industry, we are doing it very wholeheartedly. So that's why, like for example, I shared that in the past 12 months, our share of the green finance in our loan book has been more than doubled. So this is something that we are doing. Instead of losing business, we are trying to keep the business and grow that business, but on the greener path. Yeah.
Thank you. Cindy.
Okay, maybe I take the second one. How are we going to disseminate the template? Actually, because it is partly led by the Hong Kong MA, so we will channel through Hong Kong MA to reach out to the three associations in the sectors. So because in our working group, we have the financial institution banks, we have the insurance authority, and also we have SFC. So we will channel through these associations to engage with the members of them so that they can reach out to their clients in order to collect those information. This is how we are going to do it.
I think there's an offer from BEC, right, who's doing it as well, the gentleman who asked the question.
Okay.
That, yeah, maybe everybody can kind of see how to pull your resources together. Is there anything you would like to add, Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. I'd just like to add a quick comment to the question number one. Indeed, it's a matter of determination. That's true. I also work for Zurich, right? I don't know when you see the company name there. And as a group, actually, we are actually dropping all the business that are generating income from natural fuel for more than 30%, for example. And we did lose a lot of business. But whether there's something not welcome by the shareholders, not welcome by the directors, it may be different. So it's a matter of how you actually commit a message, how to tell the people what you are doing. Of course, we have to find some new ways to compensate for the loss. But that's something I think we cannot just always look at whether we want to protect business, keep the profit there, and without making the change. Yeah.
I would like to go back to that question because, if someone, comes to us to say he has a problem for, 22nd century, will we be able to work with them? Obviously, for us, we are in a business that we have, all those different stakeholders. We have the regulators, we have the shareholders, we have the depositors, and also the borrowers. So we are open to all sort of requests. And then, but at the end of the day, we have to sort out because in the finance or in the lending business, we have to make sure that the depositors' money is safe. So that's why we will assess how a customer is going to repay a loan or whatsoever. So we are open with that. And right now, basically, we are trying to see what we can do to address questions or customers' requests for like. Doing something for the future. Some customers, okay, let me give you an example. Some customers are borrowing from us to cover their whole, rooftop with a solar panel, but not for, generating any profit. They're only for doing something good. So should we finance it? Okay, of course we would consider, but it is not just be taken as a, social project. we have to consider commercial viability, everything. So we work together with them. Sometimes we involve some like consultant or NGOs together. So there's not a fixed answer on that, but we are very willing and open-minded on that.
Right. Well, I think we've passed the magic hour, and I want to thank you all. We've kept you a long, long time today. I hope that you've heard a lot from many different people, that we are fellow travelers on a very difficult and long journey. And I hope you've met some people. You've certainly met, I think, all the people who have formally presented. You know who they are. If you want to run after them, to network, I think that's a very good idea. And they represent important institutions in Hong Kong, including the government. So thank you very much again. And if you have any ideas you want us to put it in our final report, please send it to me. My email address is on the HKUST website. Thank you, and thank you all the speakers, for making special time.